as humans, we tend to think I'm either confident or I'm not. I'm either successful or I'm not. I'm either progressing or I'm not. And the reality is, there have been phases in my career where I was a superstar employee, and there have been phases in my career where I thought I was going to get fired on a regular basis. And there's so many factors. It's not that I changed in those circumstances. It's that the culture of the companies was different. The leadership styles were different. The expectations were different, right? So there's all these outside forces. It's not all or nothing. It can be, I did really well in this 9 a.m. meeting and not so well in my 2 o'clock meeting. Good to know. I learned a lot in the 2 o'clock. I can apply to tomorrow's 8 a.m., right?
Absolutely.
I think that that's like the big takeaway here is if you feel stuck in your career, it's not all or nothing. You can do these little things and you will start to see change. Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster. Hey everybody, today we are talking about building career confidence with Carolanne Hoffman from Polished Talent. She is amazing. She is motivated to empower professionals to confidently take like that next step in their journey. She provides quality resources to her followers and her content creation, and she brings hands-on experience and insights to guide individuals through various career milestones and sticking points. And so we're so excited to have her. Carolanne, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you, your background, what you're doing now, what they can look forward to hearing in this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. My name is Carolanne Hoffman, and I have been surrounding myself in all things career, whether it's career development, career transition, career confidence for my entire journey. How I like to introduce myself to a new audience is I make messy things pretty. So whether that is in my 9 to 5 or how I'm spending my time outside that window with fitness routine, travel itineraries, budgeting, or business, I like to simplify that arguably intimidating and scary first step in something new and figure out a way to make it accessible and approachable for myself and others when that comes around again. That is the story of how Polished Talent was born. Actually, a year ago this week, Polished Talent was born in the corner of my apartment. So what a fun anniversary milestone this is when I decided to take a chance on myself. So historically, I had been that go-to friend or family member for resume reviews, LinkedIn audits, interview prep, you name it, and had been receiving positive feedback from that initial group A who I was sharing my insights with, and it was working really well for them. They were like, hey, X tip got me this job, or Y tip really impressed the hiring manager. So in receiving this feedback, I felt a lot of joy and excitement from it and figured, okay, there's this wealth of knowledge. How am I able to share it with a wider audience? And in the digital age we're in, it only made sense to be creating a business that could attract anyone around the world. So Etsy became the one-stop shop for my resources to live on, which is where you can access all of our 5-star quality items for your career journey, whether you are early, mid, or experienced. And also if you are looking to accelerate in your current company through some internal mobility options, or possibly transitioning to where that next organization may be. Because of that, we also have our digital platform that I alluded to. So we have an Instagram at @BePolishedTalent, where it's crazy to think we are almost at 50,000 followers in this short time frame. So lots of like-minded, career-oriented people are able to engage, share their story, and have those tangible next steps in what defining career success or career confidence can look like. So excited to be here, share a little bit about what those definitions have looked like for me in my journey, and hopefully be able to inspire redefining what that looks like for the audience.
I love this. There's two main things you touched on that I want to loop back and talk about again. So the first thing is you said you take like messy things and make them pretty. And it's funny because I have a close friend. We talk all the time that like messy action is better than no action, right? Like even if you don't know exactly what it's going to look like, just try it, like see what happens. And then you can create the organization and the process that goes with it. And so I love that you touched on that sometimes we don't know what to do. And so we do nothing. And it doesn't always have to be perfect. It's great if you have a game plan, which is a lot about what we're going to talk about today. How do we make sure that we have like the right next steps in front of us? But even if you don't, if you're listening to this, what has made Carolanne so successful is her ability to just do messy and figure it out. So I want everyone who's listening already to have that as a takeaway of like, if you're like, I don't know what to do next, like one, obviously go check out resources that we have online. Carolanne has on her Etsy page and her digital platform. But also if you're still stuck, just do something. And then like we can create some organization on the backside. And the second thing is that you said you had this like almost test group of friends and family who just kept coming to you for advice. And you're like, I'll help you with this. And that's exactly how I got started. Is I spent 6 years. I had about 17 mentees across different companies that I just kind of collected over the course of my career that I was helping guide and giving advice. And I had one client who, we're talking dramatic turnaround, was like on a performance plan, about to get let go, to like promoted and running a huge team in less than 12 months. And that story was the moment where I was like, should this be a thing? Is this a thing that I'm doing? Should I just go with this? Right? Because to your point, it is so interesting when you realize like things that sometimes we think are obvious or that we have done wrong before and learned from already, so many people can benefit from. So I am so excited that you're here sharing your journey with us on your anniversary and getting to just like knock it out of the park with people. Because I think if nothing else, in the first 5 minutes of this episode, taking messy action and like learning what you're good at from feedback are already two amazing takeaways.
Absolutely. Because you never know when that aha moment is going to come. So you might as well just dive in.
Yep.
Do some hands-on action and see what comes about from it. And if anything, it's trial and error and you know what not to do.
Exactly.
And you can keep going from there.
Yeah.
Love that story.
And it's funny with your trial and error because I always introduce myself as like, I'm a career coach who did everything wrong in their career. That's why I know how to coach you out of it. And it is so interesting because like I made all these mistakes, right, that we talk about. I lacked confidence early on in my career. I didn't know what I was good at or how to advocate for myself. And you learn these things through trial and error. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, I just don't know what to do, it's okay to do things wrong, provided that you learn from it, you jump right back in and you're like ready to hit the ground running with the next trial.
Absolutely.
So you talk a lot about building career confidence, which is something I love and I want to spend some good amount of time on today. You know, you've really focused on like empowering professionals into building this confidence. How does that play a crucial role in career advancement? And like what actionable tips do you have for listeners?
Ooh, great question. And yes, I could talk about this all day. To me, confidence is truly the cornerstone for career advancement for a few reasons. I think practically, number one, professional presence. I mean, have you ever worked or wanted to work, let's say, been motivated by a leader who did not project confidence, capability, or confidence? You're probably not really engaged in that work. So there's definitely a level in the way you carry yourself, your body language, your tone, that expresses to another individual, hey, I have this intangible quality in order to advance and I want to apply it. Building on that, there is a level of effective communication. In general, the individuals who are more confident tend to be more effective communicators. And that can be expressing your interests, that can be asking a question, that could be presenting to a group, delegating tasks. It is simply your ability to convey information to that audience in an articulate and confident manner is going to be a huge and essential asset for you to move forward. So with that, we've now talked about the ability to attract people to you, the ability to communicate to those folks, very relationship oriented. That I would say the third piece is also focusing on yourself. So career confidence, in order to advance, also brings about a positive mindset in the way that you are communicating with others and internally. In general, the research is showing that folks who have a more positive mindset tend to set and achieve more ambitious goals. And when this happens, you have a story. You have something that is attracting people to you again, where they want to learn how you did it and how they can apply it to themselves. So again, to summarize, at the core, confidence to me is centered around people and relationships, including yourself, and how you're handling that interaction. So if you can learn those skills first, that is the piece on why confidence is so important for career advancement. In regards to the actionable steps, I would give 3. The first, before any big change or big decision, I always recommend having some time to dedicate on strategic reflection. So this goes back to that relationship with yourself. Take time to be with yourself, be with your thoughts. A practice that's been really helpful for me is visualizing, and that has been game changer. It started even back before I went to university, of closing my eyes and thinking, can I see myself on this campus? Can I see myself in this job? Can I see myself leading this team? Or even personally, can I see myself traveling here? Can I see myself embracing this culture? Like, you can apply it to all parts of your life that aren't necessarily career related. And once you understand that your desire and your visualization can attract that, it can be very powerful in impacting your success in future decisions. The second piece, and arguably the most tangible one from today's conversation, is building a brag book. So this is a fundamental artifact that we talk about regularly in the Polished Talent community, but this is a curation of what you've accomplished. So think of details related to projects, tasks, assignments, the impact it had on the company, the impact it had on your team, plus what you're taking away from the experience. What are those lessons learned? What are the skills you were able to develop? On top of a feedback tracker aligned with each of those, that can be game changer when it comes to your career. So the big actionable step is create a brag book. It is our actual number one product that we offer, and folks love it. So definitely take some time to create a brag book, because it is going to be able to apply for networking conversations, interviewing success, negotiation prep. It allows you to talk about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of what you offer to a company. Especially in today's market, showcasing your value is a huge skill. So even if you aren't having those conversations right now, it is definitely something that I would recommend people start to get confident in articulating what they are able to offer to different organizations. And thirdly, almost taking a step back, is be patient and kind with yourself when it comes to building this confidence. For myself, Kendall, I'm sure for you and many listeners here, they can relate that ambition fuels a lot of what motivates us to wake up in the morning and accomplish what's going on, messy or not. So certainly ambition can be a great motivator, but sometimes when you're new to this world or a lot piles on real fast, it can quickly crumble that self-esteem just as much as it builds it. So know that you may not get that first job, or you may not get the first raise where you try some of these strategies out, because there are factors outside of your confidence and outside of your delivery that you're unable to control. But recognizing that confidence is the guide to those next steps and not the end goal is definitely a great starting point.
There's so many good pieces I want to double click on in what you just shared. And first, can I just comment with, you have such a calm, confident, structured delivery, right? Which I would expect given your platform and your way that you coach your clients. But even hearing you talk, and I'm sure listeners can relate as well, it has so much authority with it because of your confidence and your skill and your mastery of communication. And so, I love the topic of visualization. This is, I think, vision boards. I'm going to blame Pinterest. I feel like vision boards, 5 years ago, everybody was like, I have a vision board for this. I have a vision board for this. But it is true that I think putting yourself in that mindset of I've already accomplished this. I can see myself in this role. I can see myself having this thing, does make you more successful. And I have a coach. So if you've followed me for a while, you've probably heard me talk about my multiple coaches multiple times. I have coaches for all different areas of my life because I believe in coaching. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it for a profession. And I have one coach who's like, stop talking about if and start talking about when. Your mind needs to be that you have already gotten there. And this is what you're doing with that, because people are going to feel that. That's going to translate in the way you communicate. It's going to translate in the way that you talk. And so I love that. Visualize yourself there. Take that strategic reflection to make sure that that's where you want to be. And then master that delivery to go alongside it. But one of the things I'd love to talk on a little bit from your experience is I have a lot of clients who are introverted or neurodivergent, or they struggle with some of the like speaking up on calls, right? I have lots of clients like, how do I talk more? I just don't know what to talk about.
Yes.
What advice do you have for that group in the population who hears this and goes, yes, I want to be more confident. I want to show up more successfully. I want to do all these things, but then I find myself in a meeting and I don't do it. How do you support that group? What would your advice be?
Great question. Definitely starting with the mentality shift, like you and your coach have started creating, of it's when this happens, it's not if. And that's a practice I've been taking into consideration myself and calling it out when I hear myself say if and go, oh, no, let's try that again. And actually saying out loud, when I do this, when this happens, rather than if, will be a huge starting point. And it's really an internal reflection to figure out, okay, I need to believe in myself in order for others to believe me. There's the fake it till you make it mentality that people have, and to an extent, I would definitely support it, as long as your intention and the core of your motivation is truly in, I want to be successful in this, and I am pushing myself regularly towards that goal. If you're just doing it because of poor motivations, it is probably going to come and not be successful, and you will feel the repercussions of that very quick. So tangibly, the Bragg book helped me. I am arguably an introvert, according to all of the fun personality assessments, but I'm finding myself starting to creep towards the E more and more because of this practice that I am engaging in, and for about a year or two. So the Bragg book helped me by having that go-to resource of, look at all that I have accomplished. Like, this is the impact it's having not only on myself, but on other people. And when you have that cue that shares, oh, I am able to do that. Oh, look at this skill that I was able to use over time and time again. Or look at these themes that people are telling me constantly in the feedback tracker about, I am a really great communicator, or I have a great smile, or like, it doesn't have to all be so professional. You can apply it to the personal areas of your life as well. So having the reflection exercise with the Bragg book helped me start to figure out how I want to articulate myself in front of an audience. The other piece I would add to that is we have a weekly confidence challenge on our Instagram page, where at the beginning of the week, I'll post a challenge, whether it's update your LinkedIn profile with their new skill, or go have a coffee chat with someone new you hadn't talked about, or ask someone for feedback on a recent project you did. Like, there are a bunch of different exercises that are internal and external that over time are going to build upon that success. So find those little moments, and maybe it's speaking up in a meeting this week, but don't challenge yourself to speak up in a meeting every day all up front, because that's going to go back to what we just talked about, is that self-esteem may crumble very quickly if you aren't patient with yourself throughout the journey. So definitely set those milestones and celebrate the wins when they come about.
I'm going to start sharing the weekly challenges on my social media as well. So if you guys follow me on Instagram or TikTok, I will start sharing Be Polished's weekly challenges for you guys, because I love that. And that's something that I do a lot within my program with my clients is, hey, this week, I want you to try and ask one question in every meeting that you sit in, right? Or I want you to try and lead at least 2 meetings proactively, or I want you to try and reach out and schedule a coffee chat with 2 people you haven't met before in your leadership team, right? I do that a lot, and I love the idea of it being applied more broadly, because I think you touched on something that's really critical for most people's confidences is we believe it's all or nothing. As humans, we tend to think I'm either confident or I'm not. I'm either successful or I'm not. I'm either progressing or I'm not. And the reality is, there have been phases in my career where I was a superstar employee, and there have been phases in my career where I thought I was going to get fired on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And there's so many factors. It's not that I changed in those circumstances. It's that the culture of the companies was different. The leadership styles were different. The expectations were different, right? So there's all these outside forces. It's not all or nothing. It can be, I did really well in this 9 a.m. meeting and not so well in my 2 o'clock meeting. Good to know. I learned a lot in the 2 o'clock. I can apply to tomorrow's 8 a.m., right?
Absolutely.
I think that that's like the big takeaway here is if you feel stuck in your career, it's not all or nothing. You can do these little things and you will start to see change. But to your point, I require people to work with me 6 months because I said, even if you change quickly, companies move slowly. It takes time for them to respond to your confidence. It takes time for them to respond to your brag book. It takes time to shift perspectives. And I think that's so true what you're touching on of like, give yourself those micro milestones rather than feeling like, I woke up today and I'm a new person. This is why I hate New Year's resolutions. Jan 1, nothing is different from December 31st. Like same you, same desire to eat a donut. My kids just had donuts, and it's
sounds delicious right now.
Oh God. So it's okay to feel like you're getting better incrementally, even with setbacks. And I'm going to pause there because I want you to chime in on this too, but I think it's just such a great topic to really drive home for all the listeners.
Oh, I completely agree. I find a lot of accomplishment when I check things off my to-do list. And I think a lot of people are able to relate to that because they get that immediate confidence back of, great, I checked that off, look at me go. Confidence building doesn't exactly work the same. You can't exactly say, be confident and check it off, and it always applies. Like, just doesn't, there's not a one-to-one relationship, unfortunately, and if someone figures out the formula, please tag me and let me know, because I would love to learn that. But there are definitely days where it seems like a roller coaster of, I did really well, and then I didn't. Like, the external factors you talk about, you can only control yourself. Other people may be having good or bad days, and how you respond to that is up to you. Company may be going through really good or really hard times, out of your control, but how you respond to that, that's up to you. It happens also on the personal side with family and friend relationships, what's happening in the weather, even like you get to decide how you respond to the various circumstances that show in your life. And that skill set over time and how you respond ends up becoming that new checklist of, I responded positively to X today. Check it off. I responded maybe not so well, and that's okay. You can still check it off, but as long as you go back and are intentional in how you're starting to behave in those regular practices, I think that's where you start to see the shift and where that intuitive when starts to come more about more than the if, because you have the mental shift changing more than the physical.
Yeah. Tactical takeaway from this is it's okay to look back and say, hey, I did well in one thing and not in the other, right? So if you are a checklist person, I'm a checklist person. I relate to you, Carolanne, in this so much. I have something literally on my list that says like check in with team members once a day, because I tend to be a very hands-off manager. And I know this about myself. Some people really thrive with that. Some people don't. Every day, how's everybody doing? Because if I don't put it on my checklist, I'll forget to do it, and then I'll be mad at myself, and then the next day I get cranky, right? It's a snowball effect. So
Understood.
where you know you have some difficulties, write it on that checklist. Maybe it's not as vague as be confident, because I agree, I don't know that I would ever check that box, even in days where I feel really good about my performance. But at least like, hey, ask a question in the 9 a.m. meeting, or follow up with so-and-so, or schedule a coffee chat. Like those types of tactical things you can put on that to-do list. You can hold yourself accountable and feel the sense of accomplishment that you did it, even if the rest of your day doesn't feel like you were at 100%. So I think that's one big tactical piece. And then a quick relatable story is I have a very short fuse as just a person, okay? I'm very reactive naturally. And I tend to have a very direct style of communication. Like what you see is what you get. You either love that or you hate it. But at one point in my career, this was a big sticking point for me, because to what you speak, and I wish I'd known you 10 years ago, you have to be able to build relationships. You have to be able to build those strong foundations. You have to be able to ask questions respectfully, push back respectfully, disagree without actually disagreeing. Like, you have to have all this tact in the corporate world that I just honestly didn't have. And it's funny because now 10 years later, I've built a lot of those skills. And even so, somebody will send a snarky email to my team, and my first email draft is like, screw you, don't you talk to my people like that. And I have to like delete it and be like, okay, take a breath, think about the right way to respond. And I proofread my emails like 10, 15, 20 times, especially if I'm worked up, because I know I have that reactivity in me, and I want to just like, no, that's stupid. No, don't say that. Like, that's my knee-jerk reaction. And so, I had a situation a couple weeks ago where I asked my husband, I'm like, can you read this email? Do I sound awful? I've rewritten it like 12 times, but I need to make sure before I send it that it sounds nice. And he's like, it sounds fine. I was like, okay. Because I have to be careful. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, well, maybe you're not very reactive. Maybe your reaction is, I shut down completely. If there's conflict, I don't respond. Or if there's a tense meeting, I don't speak. I just listen. Or if I feel like I've done something wrong, then I spend the rest of my day struggling with like, okay, how do I bounce back? Regardless of what your natural reaction style is, start to Carolanne's point, really reflect on that. What are those things? How well do you know yourself? How do you react? And then start to build those practices of checking. Like I do, if I want to write a spicy email, I leave it on my computer for 30 minutes and then I go back and reread it to make sure it's okay before I send. Like, these are practices I've built to help me with my particular communication style. So all of this is like, I think these tactical pieces, right? Build those practices you can put on your checklist. Build those practices to check yourself when you know you have a tendency to not speak up or to speak up too much, depending on which end of the spectrum you are on, so that you can feel like you're making progress and then have some grace, right? There are days
So important.
where I'm like, that wasn't my best, did not put best foot forward today, right? But we have to be patient with ourselves, especially if you're in that growth period.
Yes, I support that completely. I also tend to find myself having that protective nature in my email, and tend to write a lot of my drafts in preparation for the next day, because writing emails can be time consuming, especially big follow-up ones. So I'll prep them in advance and make sure my tone is appropriate for the audience and potentially the urgency of the conversation. So definitely appreciate the practice that you also have in, okay, let's reread this, make sure it's actually communicating what I want it to communicate, because there's a credibility piece to every email or communication piece that you send out. So appreciate that. The second comment I'll quickly make, going back to your first point on to-do lists, I love to-do lists. And I'm also finding myself transitioning to a calendar drive, like a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar, whatever your go-to app, whatever you use. Time blocking has been so helpful for me. And I smiled when you mentioned, hey, check in with team members, because I do the same thing. Like, every day at 9 a.m., I have that checklist of, these are my few team members. Did I send one to this person, and this person? Great. Check it off, move on. And if I didn't have time at 9 a.m., I'm going to move that time block to 10, or when the next best time is, because I also don't want to send that message to my team and then not respond when they get back to me. So being intentional and respectful of both folks' time is definitely critical. So definitely recommend time blocking.
I tell everybody to time block. When people come to me and they're like, I don't know how to be productive, I'm like, are you time blocking? It's like my first question. And I think time blocking can be hard because our calendars are sometimes at the whims of others, right? Of like, somebody schedules something unexpected, it messes up our time block. But like for me, I have 30 minutes every morning. That's like my admin time. That's when I get all my tasks done. That's when I send my emails. That's when I do my follow-ups. And it's like a list that's standing. And then I may have like a big block of calls. And then I have a like leave your desk time block. Like, be outside.
Step away.
Exactly.
Enjoy the sun.
I know. And it's so true. And it just resonates so well. So if you haven't tried time blocking and you're listening, try time blocking. Do it. It's amazing. I can already tell, Caroline, we're going to have you back because like you and I could talk for 3 days.
I love this.
One of the things I want to talk on as we're talking about like, you know, this confidence growth as a journey, some of the things you're learning, like you may not be 100% all the time. You know, you've had some challenges and some triumphs that you've overcome. You were promoted 3 times in less than 3 years. You hit some pretty significant career milestones. Like, what are some of the challenges that you faced on your personal journey? And then like the strategies that you used to help overcome those so that you could continue to be successful?
Great question. Okay. I'm responding to things and themes of 3. So I'm going to stick to that.
I love it. I do the same. I do the same.
I love it. First and foremost, I would say navigating the role transition is definitely a challenge in and of itself. The second would be building and leading a team when the opportunity arises. And then third, everyone's favorite conversation of managing that life-work balance. So working in that order, navigating the role transition in and of itself, I was thankfully in a position in all of these changes where my role was evolving with the needs of the company. So in general, the themes of my leadership and the organization's priorities were not really shifting. However, my scope was shifting in how I was contributing to those greater needs. So what helped me in navigating is seeking mentorship, both within and outside of the company, to understand what was I really doing well. How am I identifying gaps in my workflow? And also how am I being proactive in this change? And in reflecting on that, the biggest piece I learned was, and again, this is my role, my company, my industry, may be different for others, but it was better for me to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And that was just the needs of what was happening in the company at the time. And I found that many of my leaders appreciated that initiative more than the hierarchy need because of the fast-paced environment that we were in. So figure out what that culture and tone is within your company, figure out what hat you're wearing at what point in time, what does that mean in terms of how you're setting boundaries for how your work hours are spent, because in a 9 to 5 you're committing from 9 to 5, you're not committing from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Have your boundaries, set them up when appropriate, and then ensure that that's communicated with others. And that really helped me in navigating the role change in and of itself, especially when you're in the same company and you're historically known for doing X thing and now you're doing Y thing. That can be hard to switch. The second piece was building and leading a team. So as my responsibilities grew, this also meant that I was growing into leadership positions and had the ability to manage team members early on in my career. And what I anticipated was going to happen when I got this fancy manager title was I immediately needed to figure out what my leadership style was. So I was doing all the research on there's authoritarian leadership style, there's transformational leadership style, you name it, there's a definition out there for it. And I really struggled with that because I didn't know what bucket I fit in. And what I quickly realized in having conversations with my team was I just fell back into how I was regularly operating. And that didn't mean that I fit one label over another, but it was rather how I was performing the roles before that manager gig. That's what set me up for success. That's what was making me successful there and how they saw the potential for this next shift. And that's what was attractive to my team, too, that they liked past Carolanne and how past Carolanne operated. Just because you get a new title, especially one where you're leading team members, doesn't mean you have to completely shift how things are getting done. And so that was a big aha moment for me. And the second piece I'll also say with leading a team is, to me, leading a team goes beyond the soft skills. So definitely empathy, leadership, communication, all qualities we could agree on that make a successful leader are important. But to me, leading a team also means having a point of view and empowering your team to have a point of view. So that was the other big wow moment when I stepped into being a leader was, I need to figure out my point of view. What do I think about this initiative? Or what do I think about this project? Or how does X team member versus Y team member want to develop in their career paths? Because they're not one-to-one. They're going to be personalized to that individual's journey. So figuring out what my point of view was at the organizational department, team, and individual level was critical for me. And it brought me confidence through curiosity, because I had to be more curious than I ever was before. It brought me confidence through decisiveness, because I needed to make a decision. I was no longer being informed, hey, this is happening, and this is how you're going to do it. It was, hey, this is happening, what do we do next? Or how should we go about this? So the decisiveness, and then the third piece, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, is confidence through articulation and being an effective communicator. So having a strategic plan and how that vision was going to come across. The third piece, I'll also say in the challenges, no surprise to many, is the life-work balance. And that is a term I recently learned on social media, was shifting the narrative of work-life to life-work balance, and I love it. So shout out to whoever coined it. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but this flip really helped me become more intentional in how my time was being spent outside the 9 to 5, and on top of now having this extra side hustle, per se. So I am constantly continuing to learn what makes the most sense for me in my current life era. But how I'm approaching this balance is, what does present Carolanne, what is she doing to help future Carolanne? And that can vary based on what current Carolanne's priorities are versus future Carolanne's priorities, current Carolanne's boundaries versus future Carolanne's boundaries. And then I would also say the who does and who doesn't need to know what those priorities are. And I think that can sometimes be the missing piece that folks miss, is you can definitely share these things, but you are not obligated to share your priorities with anyone. Those can be very personal to you. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm figuring out what my priorities are in terms of relationships, wellness, and learning. And I welcome others to figure out what are those categories of priorities in your life, and how are you intentionally spending that time outside of work. I have shared a lot now, so I will pause again.
I love it. No, but these were all so good. These were all so good. No, and I'm thinking as you're talking, right? The first one you said, the ask for forgiveness, not for permission. I want to double back and touch on that a little bit, because I think this is the difference between people who are rapidly successful in their careers and people who stagnate. And yes, you're so right. There is like a company culture element to this, and a leadership style element to this, where some companies, they don't want you to go innovate and come up with new solutions. They just want you to do your day job, and you wait 5 years for each promotion, and that's the way they operate. But in my experience, similar to yours, I think what set me apart from peers is I just did stuff.
Yes.
And then I would inform you that I did stuff that was helpful for you. You're welcome. And now I'm on to the next thing. And that proactivity in your career, that leaning into your career, I think managers don't know how to ask people to do this, because it sounds wrong to be like, go rogue, figure stuff out, tell me after. Like you don't want to give that advice as a manager. Mm-hmm. And so what a lot of managers default to is like, you're not leaning in enough, or you don't seem committed enough, or they use that kind of language. And most people are like, that's not true at all. I'm super committed. I love my job. I'm doing everything you're asking me to do. But that, hey, I'm just going to go do. I'm going to figure out problems. I'm going to solve them. And I talk a lot with my clients on the personal branding side. And like for me, my personal brand is, I'm the person that you put in the black hole where nobody knows what's going on. And I will bring organization to that chaos and get you results quickly. That's my personal brand, because I made such a name for myself just doing, and then asking for forgiveness if something went wrong. And I think the flip side of this is, and the flip side of this is being able to recognize and acknowledge when you do something that doesn't go the way you hoped it would, right? I'm the first person to stand up and say, hey, I made a mistake, or my team made a mistake. We're fixing it. Here's the problem or the plan for resolution. Here's where we're going next. Want everybody informed. I'm the first to admit when I do something wrong, which I think a lot of people also struggle with, but that could be a whole separate episode. Absolutely. But I think that if you're going in and you're doing stuff, if you make a mistake, you ask for forgiveness. If you don't, and it's great, you just inform everybody. Like that's the sign of those true leaders who I think scale really high, really quickly. So I think that's an amazing piece of advice. And if you're listening to this and you're like, my boss would never go for that, odds are your boss probably would. Some companies I have seen have a culture where they don't want you involved. I have a client right now facing that, but it's very rare. Like 1 out of every 100 clients I get is in a culture that truly doesn't want you innovating. And so odds are it's more of a fear of failure on your side than it is a lack of interest on your company's side.
Yes.
And then I think
one of the like weekly confidence challenges you have on your to-do list is, instead of saying, hey boss, here's the problem, it's, hey boss, I'm experiencing this challenge and here's what I'm proposing as the solution. What are your thoughts? Yeah. So that's how you can go about it as an individual contributor, or flip the roles. If you're a manager who wants your team member to feel more empowered, to have a confidence in their voice, ask them when they have a question. When they say, hey manager, I'm having this problem, what do I do next? Instead of saying, well, I would recommend you do da 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 da, which may be a very successful tactic, put it back on the team member and say, well, what do you recommend? What would be the best next step? And that starts to get their wheels turning. And so instead of this best practice that may always work, maybe there's something else neither of you had considered before. I use that with my team members, and I can see the confidence starting to build in them, where instead of a very tactical mindset that one may have, it's starting to become more proactive, or they're thinking of that next layer of, instead of just being reactive and having the Band-Aid solution, what is it going to mean when the company scales, or when this process gets applied to 5 other teams instead of just right here and now? Something to consider when you're having your next one-on-one.
Yep. And building on that leadership aspect, I don't know that I have a leadership style. I'm sure I do. Mine is mostly like open communication and autonomy is pretty much how I operate. But I think also you learn so much when you become a leader, right? I don't know that people who were on my team 10 years ago would say I was the greatest boss ever, but I've since learned a lot, and I now have a completely poached team from people that used to work for me who I've just collected all over again, because you do get better. So I think also if you're stepping into that leadership role, if it's your first time, you're going to make mistakes. It's like learning a new job. It's a completely different scope of work. It's a completely different scope of influence. It's going to take time. But if you're intentional, you can learn those lessons much faster without the negative consequences to your team, right? What are the ways that you manage an underperformer versus an overperformer? They're very different. I have high performers that one time a month we could check in and they'd be rocking and rolling and have no issues whatsoever, right? I have other people that require 3, 4, 5 times a week, not because I'm micromanaging, but because they ask for that type of support, right? So how do you build fungibility in your leadership style based on who you're managing and things like that? So we could have a whole nother episode about leadership, and I love it, but I want to make sure that we have time to point people in the right direction. So Carolanne, this has been such an amazing conversation. We will definitely have you back. If people loved this and they want to find you and they want to download the brag book, or they want to connect with you in your weekly challenges, where do people go? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, great question. So the Etsy shop is Polished Talent. So I think it's like polishedtalent.etsy.com sort of thing. I can include it in a follow-up email to you. But that is where all the resources are hosted for the more community vibe, to get some daily insight into what have been best practices for me and other team members. Instagram @BePolishedTalent is where you all can find me.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll link everything in the show notes. So if you're listening, go down and check out the show notes. Also, if you love today's episode, make sure you review us and give us 5 stars and you subscribe so that we can have more amazing guests like Carolanne on the show. But I always like to end with the same question. Carolanne, what's one tactical piece of advice you would give listeners and say, hey, go do this tomorrow to get started on building your confidence, to get to that next level of your career? What's that number one takeaway for you?
Great question. My one takeaway for the audience would be to go and create and maintain your brag book throughout your career. This is a tangible tool that is going to serve as a career confidence exercise, and it's going to empower you by showcasing your value with clarity in the inevitable professional discussions that pop up in your career, like networking, like interviewing, like negotiation, like performance reviews. We all have them. So go and create your brag book and focus on those core principles that we discussed related to the accomplishment and the feedback tracker. And when you do that, you're going to be setting yourself up for not only short-term success, but that long-term excellence as well.
Awesome. It was so great having you on the show, Carolanne. We appreciate your time. We'll have to have you back, but otherwise, thanks again for such a great conversation.
Thanks for the invite. Bye, Kendall.